Hello, and welcome to the video which begins our study and discussion on the movies. Let me begin by saying that those who create movies are sometimes God's storytellers. Have you ever given any thought to the fact that many of the movies made over the years since that industry began have been inspired in order to bring an important message to the people of the world? Let's talk about some of the most significant of these films that are somewhat recent and the messages that they've brought to us over a number of relatively recent decades. For a great many years, it's been well known to some that the arts are often favored by positive cosmic forces as a means of delivering important messages to the people of the world. This has certainly been true in the case of a number of movies that have been made during and subsequent to the decade of the 1970s. It would not be wise, nor is it intended by this speaker, to put words into the mouths of the talented writers, directors, producers, and actors involved, for many of them had no idea that the stories they were telling had been inspired for the purpose of bringing important messages to the worldwide audiences that they have reached. In the opinion of some, the first Star Wars trilogy that was released constitutes one of the most significant instances of such inspiration during that time period. It should be restated, however, that there's no intention to put words into the mouths of the people who create such stories, because they're often unaware that they're being inspired as instruments through which powerful, positive spiritual forces bring important messages to register on the higher consciousness of a worldwide audience. It might interest you to know that within the story of that Star Wars trilogy is woven the threads of a message that is common to the stories in a number of other films also. In order to provide a bit of background for some of the higher concepts that these stories are bringing forth, it should be explained that our planet is watched over by a spirit being known as the planetary Logos. One of the many blessings provided by this Logos is that of acting as a spiritual mentor, teacher, and guide to persons who have reached a certain level of spiritual development in their lives as they make their way on the path to higher spiritual attainment. The time period for this high office of Logos for our planet approximates the length of an age, or about 2,160 years. For most of the Piscean or Piscean age, our planetary Logos has been the beloved one, the ascended Master Jesus, the Christ. If you recall, he told us that he would be with us always, even to the end of the age. This role is symbolically portrayed, although it is on a galactic scale rather than a planetary scale, very well in the first released Star Wars trilogy by the Jedi Master Yoda, a spiritual mentor, teacher, guide for those who have reached a certain level of readiness. Although his time of mentorship is near an end, Yoda takes on the training of aspirant Luke Skywalker, a young man who is strong with the Force, as they say, and who has the potential to bring about much needed change by setting in motion those forces which will destroy the evil empire and restore harmony and order to the galaxy. Yoda began this aspirant's formal training at the request of Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi who had been trained many years before as an apprentice under another Jedi Master, while under the watchful eye of the Jedi Master Yoda. Excuse me. During the teaching process, Yoda speaks many words of wisdom, planting in the mind and the heart of his student the seeds of greater spiritual growth. Even before we see Yoda, however, we hear some of the Jedi teachings as spoken by Obi-Wan when he tells Luke, "Your eyes can deceive you. Reach out with your feelings. Trust your feelings." This is a veiled way of telling Luke to look to the higher self that lives within each of us and to trust the inner guidance of the higher self. Yoda himself later tells Luke, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter," as he touches Luke's shoulder. This, of course, means that our body is not the real us, but is simply a vehicle that we, a spirit being of light, have chosen and fashioned according to our needs for a given incarnation, to allow us to live in and learn on this physical, material plane. Because this is a physical world, there are, of course, many aspects of life on this material plane that lend themselves easily to becoming obstacles and are therefore not particularly helpful to those who seek a higher way of life. To quote Yoda once again, a Jedi craves not these things. In one manifestation of such obstacles, there are from time to time those who become overly concerned about appearance, either speculating about how some great spiritual personality from the past may have looked, or even deciding how people today ought to have a certain appearance to be more acceptable or credible in today's society. Yoda very capably addressed this false notion when he said, "Judge me by my size, do you? And well, you should not." He could as easily have said, "Judge me by the color of my skin, do you? Or by my clothing? Or by my education? Or by my economic condition, do you? And well, you should not." Very possibly you may have noticed a number of additional instances in this trilogy where the Master Yoda passes along his wisdom and his knowledge to the serious young aspirant Luke Skywalker. You may rest assured that these pearls of wisdom did not occur in the dialogue by accident. We assume that when Yoda's work was completed and he passed over to the other plane of existence, he went on to a yet higher work in the same way that the Master Jesus, who has been our planetary logos, will someday soon replace Osiris, the existing solar logos, and the new planetary logos will be there to replace the Master Jesus in the years ahead. The person who will become the new planetary logos came together at birth into a state of oneness of spirit with the universal Christ Spirit. This person has now grown into adulthood and will, at the appropriate time, begin work as the planetary master of the Aquarian Age. Excuse me. After that person's work as the planetary master is complete, that person will then pass over and become the planetary logos. It is worthwhile for you to be aware that the age of Aquarius slowly began to open its doors to admit us quite a number of years ago. As an aside, I would like to say at this time that using the term the Aquarian Age may cause many to misunderstand the reason why the term was used. Some will automatically want to classify the speaker and the words spoken here by applying some name or label, and therefore try to associate this speaker with any and all beliefs and writings, no matter how outlandish, that they currently ascribe to that name or label. This is primarily because of the words New Age. Let it be said here and now, therefore, that this speaker, I, subscribe to what is stated in these videos and in my own written words, and should therefore not be associated with anything other than that. It is understood by the speaker that the facts as stated here may seem to be unlike that to which many of us had already become accustomed. These facts, which may seem strange to many people, need no label other than truth. The author has heard it said, however, that the only real truth is that all truth is relative. Excuse me. Therefore, what is true for children may not be true for young adults. And what is true for young adults may not be true for mature persons with years of life's experiences behind them. As the years go by, life has a way of changing our perspective, so that many of the things about which we were so uncertain when we were young, we see with confidence in later years. On the other hand, many things about which we were so certain when we were young become such that we must later reconsider these supposed truths in the light of our many years of life's experiences. So I trust that those who read what is being stated here or listen to what's being stated here will do so with an open mind and a receptive heart. Getting back to our discussion of the movies, in the first released Star Wars trilogy, Darth Vader is symbolic of the great majority of collective humankind, and like it, has been seduced by the dark side of the Force. In the case of literal greater humankind today, it has been seduced by materialism, the worship of things, by greed for these things, and for the wealth to purchase them and possess them, by lust for power and the wealth to attain and keep it, and by negative feelings of prejudice, anger, intolerance, and hatred. On the other side of the coin, it's very well known that there are many decent, loving people in this world. There are many who feel and many who claim closeness to God through their religion, their faith, and so on. Be assured, however, that there are exceedingly few who, like Luke Skywalker, have been willing to give up seeking anything for themselves, and who have instead truly dedicated themselves to a life of service. That is why the Judeo-Christian Bible, as an example, states that strait is the gate and narrow is the way, and few there be that find it. Luke Skywalker symbolizes the unselfish servant of higher, positive cosmic forces. He symbolizes the person who has been willing to reincarnate in this physical world to help get humankind back on track, so to speak, to help take humankind out of the darkness, and who will show them the way back to the light. In other words, to point humankind to and prepare them for the one who will follow, the one who is the master of the Aquarian Age, the person whose spirit is one with, and who is the physical manifestation of, the return of the universal Christ, just as it was with the beloved Master Jesus in times past, approximately 2,000 years ago. This master of the Aquarian Age will then help humankind to begin taking the next steps on the long journey back to God. Darth Vader, again with the Star Wars trilogy, as Luke's father, again symbolizes the humankind that is the father of us all. Luke's mission is made plain when, in Return of the Jedi, he tells the dying Darth Vader, a man who has just thrown off the chains that had bound him to the dark side of the Force, "I've got to save you." Vader's response tells us that Luke's mission to this point has been successful when he says, "You already have, Luke." He knows that with the help of his son, who symbolizes one of the two literal sons, S-O-N-S with a capital S, to be discussed later, he has freed himself from the dark side and has returned to the light. Excuse me. Like Darth Vader, humankind, in the end, will throw off the chains of darkness, meaning the chains of materialism and all of the negativity that accompanies it, and will return to the light. Other significant roles are symbolically portrayed by the various characters in the trilogy. Obi-Wan symbolizes another of those personalities who have mastered life in the material world and return only to serve, incarnation after incarnation. This service includes acting as teachers and guides to those who are students on the path. And frankly, aren't we all students on the path to one degree or another? When these students reach a certain level of attainment, then Yoda tends to become more and more involved in their training, higher level people in their training. The Emperor is actually symbolic of the Antichrist, who, in our real world, will be coming onto the world stage before too much longer. The relatively recent approach of the planet Mars in 2003 to the closest point it has been in almost 60,000 years was not likely to have been an insignificant event in that regard, nor can the time of its approach to that point be disregarded as being without significance in relation to the Afghan War, and certainly more so to the Iraqi War and other larger conflicts which can follow later. In the Star Wars story, those around Luke, his sister Leia, his friend Han Solo, and others are symbolic of those who will be there to follow an aspiring Jedi in order to assist with the important work that is being done. As you might imagine, such missions are not an everyday occurrence. This concludes our first video on the movies. I thank you for watching, and I invite you to watch the next video, which will complete our discussion about the movies. Again, thank you.